Welcome back to On the Flip Side. My name is Adam Shellwalker, and today we're going to be covering the Mount Fuji Doomjazz Corporation's 2011 record, Anthropomorphic. The Mount Fuji Doomjazz Corporation is a live improv, jazz, drone, doom group that is a side project of the Kilimanjaro Dark Jazz Ensemble. Truth be told, I don't really know too much about either of these bands, as I have slowly been kind of drifting my way further into listening to a lot of like drone music and a lot of like these expanded soundscape styles of music. I have experience with bands like Sun, obviously, and stuff like Swans or some of Brian Eno's ambient work, but this is a genre that I needed to kind of get into a little bit more. So I stumbled upon this record and I thought it was pretty brilliant. I hadn't listened to the entire thing because when I first heard like the first like 20 minutes of this thing, I decided I was like, well, I should probably get a copy of this to review. So other than like the first like song and a half on this thing, I'm going into this thing pretty blind, but I thought it'd be a good candidate for review just because it's just a weird record. It's one of those albums where like the entire thing in and of itself is kind of like one track length. If you actually listen to this album on like Spotify, it's like the entire thing is one track. It's Anthropomorphic. On the record here we have two records. Each side is separated into its own section, and they are each live performances from different venues and different times of this same song, from what I can tell, that have been improvised heavily. So the first disc is Space and Dimension, and disc 2 is Form and Function. And normally with two disc records I split them up disc to disc, but I think we are going to do each individual side for this one. So we're going to go over Space, then we're going to go over Dimension, then Form, then Function. We're going to space them out each and see how things evolve, and we're going to talk about it a little bit. And I've not done a drone review on this channel before, so if you like it, leave a comment and tell me if you want more videos like this. I'm definitely experimenting a little bit by trying this because I have found that drone and ambient records can be a bit difficult to review just based on like how you have to review them. So I'm going to give this my best shot, and bear with me on this one because I'm hoping to make this as entertaining for you as it is, fun for me to make. We're going to give side one of this thing a spin, and we'll come back to you on the flip side. We are back with side one of this record with Space. All I can really say after that listen is just wow. This album is really remarkable. So for this first track, Space, you get this very slow, brooding horn section that wails out over the top of the beginning of this section. This track kind of puts you in this headspace of unease, but almost to like a weirdly comforting extent. It's just this really easy tension between these two boundaries, with these just the cries of like loneliness, like kind of hugging and suffocating you. They're really building a lot on this thing. This is to be expected for this kind of record, but I'm still just impressed with what they're doing on this thing and how effective they are at really just kind of showing you something that almost in some ways shouldn't be seen. The phrasing on these notes and the way it's presented here is almost like you're not really meant to be hearing this. Like those things you're not supposed to see. It's the things that go on kind of behind closed doors, and it just gives this almost like voyeuristic experience where you're just watching someone like lay their soul completely bare. It's a really fascinating listen. It's not just that it's really personal or intimate either, it's harshly beautiful. And I think that really plays into the blend that they're doing here of jazz and drone and these doom elements in here to like fill out this track and really beef it up with just these really big gargantuan walls of noise. And it's not like a harsh noise record either. Like there's a lot of layers to the stuff going on here. It's not just like walls of static or anything. There's just quite a lot of busyness in this track. I think when you're looking at these tracks, I think that the titling of each of the tracks is important here. So while I'm analyzing these, I'm going to try and kind of look at these from a lens of the title for these things. Since there's no lyrics in these tracks or anything, I think I'm going to try my best to fit with the themes that they were going for just based off of how they played these, how they named these segments of these songs. It really puts into your mind like this kind of image of, or at least for me, this image of like two dead planets locked in some kind of eternal dance to the end of the universe. Like their gravity just inescapable. Now, I am no classically trained musician. I play a bit of guitar and I like to sing in the car. So describing exactly what this band is doing is really not in the cards for me to do. So I'm going to continue interpreting what they're doing as best as they can, and I'll try and explain a little bit more of the stuff because this track evolves past a lot of these soundscapes of these big roaring like horns and stuff to these really interesting synth sections that I can probably put a little bit into terms. They're using some kind of synth at part of this song at really strange frequencies with very little discernible tempo, and it just kind of cuts through this wall of noise and builds upon these other strange sampled noises, and then kind of fades back down to a lull and reintroduces these horn sections into these like big, huge, despondent swaths of noise. We are going to continue on to side 2. I'm going to cover that as best as I can. Like I said, I haven't really done like a noise or ambient record before, so we're going to keep continuing to see how this goes. And I'm just going to kind of keep writing my thoughts. And if you have listened to this album, write your experiences with it in the comments. Let me know what you think of it. Other than that, we're going to continue on to the next song. Alrighty, so we are back with the second song on the record, Dimension. Following along similar lines of solitude and deep brooding psychosis, this track continues to delve deeper into these extreme, almost high-pressure fathoms of sound, like a submarine descending into the Marianas Trench. It is just heavy, heavy shit. There are subtle touches here and there in this mix of like underneath these main horns that almost harmonize with the main section of this song, but are a little bit off, a little bit unrecognizable in some ways. It's sort of like an uncanny valley kind of situation. It's kind of like if you were to try and describe a conversation heard through several layers of walls and rooms and translating that into another language in some ways. All of this seemingly comes down to, in a lot of ways, this song structure that's built around translation loss. In the midsection of this song, there's this point where these like huge oscilloscope type like synths return over these huge 808 bass sounds that kind of shock your system into submission, almost like drowning out every other sense. This just like hypnotic wall of noise with just these really huge stark highs that like you couldn't think get any higher in pitch, but they just keep going and going like it's drilling into your brain. The horns at the end of this song kind of start to return and they sort of cry out. It almost sounds like these guttural death metal growls in some segments, but it's just these horns that are being played so despondently that it's just crushing. It sounds like a dying animal or like a wailing of like a mother burying their child. And the dramatic silence and emptiness that follows this is just like really stunning. Anyway, that is the second track on this thing. We are going to come around and listen to the third and come back to you. So we have side 3 of the record with the track Form. The strings that start this track almost battle with these touches of synths that appear kind of intermittently over the wave of reverbed out bass and cello, capturing this exposed beating heart of every doom theme and motif that has ever existed. This song may be one of the heaviest tracks I've ever heard outside of a standard death metal genre or black metal genre. It is just absolutely soul-crushing how goddamn heavy this song is. Just like these creeping sounds of rusting bolts creaking along some sort of machine make up this soundtrack for tragedy with these slow swells of anxiety-inducing low register tones. This album and this song really introduce these immense segments for mass disassociation, like in a sense of watching yourself kind of melt away from the reality of any situation for a brief moment, then just crashing back into yourself for a crushing collision of ego and form. There's a segment in here towards the end of this track with these almost tribal-like drum patterns that really just drag you as if a chain has been linked down at your ankles down into the bottom of a pit filled with shards of broken glass. This is a song for the death of hope. And I think that's really the picture that the Mount Fuji Doomjazz Corporation is intending to paint on this album. There is just such a huge swelling mass of complete and utter hopelessness that this album is just pulling you along through, and it is so incredibly brutal and powerful. And I don't know if I've heard an album like this before. I mean, you can listen to all kinds of fuck all drone records, but this album is just pure and utter, like, up the wrist, slitting your wrists in a bathtub suicide music, and it is incredible. The amount of emotion that's just packed into the way these players are playing their instruments, and just the way that it is just completely, perfectly introducing your brain to just these absolute waves of anxiety, fear, terror, hopelessness. All of it is just incredible. I don't even know what to say. Like, the further I get into this record, the more just absolutely brilliant it is. And I think we're going to go on to this last track, and we're going to see how it wraps up, but, like, god damn if it's not already promising. Like, this is a really, really good record. So, we are on to the final side of the record with track 4, Function. This final song, this colossal wave of sound washes over your body, and with it are some of the most beautiful and cathartic strings I have ever heard. There's a brilliant melancholy in these notes that sweep along the track that become muddied and drowned out by these waves of feedback that build on these machine-like waves. The beauty fades, the crushing weight of echoes and torment remain, and in this thunderous rapture, these high tones descend from the top of this track, from above everything else to silence the chaos. But if only for a moment. And these despondent cries of strings return over these slow drips of blood almost drawn from a wound. The stark contrast of beauty derived from such pain and agony is the tragedy of this album. It is a keeper of things you hold dear slipping away into unknown chasms of stone and echo, a blackness so dark you couldn't see your hand if it was right in front of your face. Eons of true black in an auditory form, engulfing all in its path. This album, it's not just some of the best drone or ambient music I've ever heard. It's some of the best music I've ever heard. And it is so raw and unerring in its presentation, and so genuine in how it wants you to engage with it. There's no casually listening to this record. You really, really need to sit and focus on it. And it's not that, like, I think anyone can get this record. I think anyone can listen to this record and understand it. You know, I think that there's things in this record that dwell in all humans that are just so profoundly raw and unabashedly sad and crushing that to not recognize these things would be unhealthy. You know, this is therapy in a fucking album format. And if you haven't listened to this album, listen to it. Give this hour up after watching this and listen to this album immediately. And let me know what you think in the comments. Leave a like and just comment in the description what the hell is going through your head while you're listening to this. Do what I did, and the way I approached this was just listening to the track and interpreting it in my own head in a way that, you know, the way that the album painted these pictures in my head, I wanted to interpret to you guys. Ambient records and the like have a very interesting way of affecting the brain, I think, in that there's very little in the way of theme from lyrics, because there's generally no lyrics, and it is all derived from the personal listening experience and the life experience of the person listening to it. You know, I think you'd have to be a bit messed up to get happiness from this record, but I think that it is genuinely one of the most breathtaking albums I think I've ever heard, and I cannot believe I hadn't heard of this project sooner, and you should absolutely listen to this record. Anthropomorphic by the Mount Fuji Doomjazz Corporation is 100% fucking brilliance. It is so goddamn good. Thank you all so much for watching and for if you're listening along, so much for experiencing this with me. I highly recommend going through and listening to these tracks. And if you want to like watch the segments of the videos where I'm talking about, I want to see how it contrasts from your guys' experiences, because I think there's a lot to be said for this album. There's a lot to be said for this kind of music and this genre, and just this goddamn album is just so, I wouldn't even say groundbreaking, but it has such a way with tones and what it's doing. And I would just highly recommend you guys get on like a good pair of headphones or throw on like a good setup and just listen to this thing. Don't listen to it quietly either. This thing, the bass tones on this thing shook my house. And I'm not above half on my receiver. Like, this is below half volume for me. And there were segments of this song that shook my house. You should listen to this at a pretty reasonable volume. Not quietly, not so loud that it's overbearing, but loud enough that those low tones begin to shake your house, because oh my god, it is such an experience and such a roller coaster of enjoyment and self-loathing that it is bizarre. This is a bizarre record, and it is a flawless record. Listen to this immediately. Thank you all so much for watching again. We'll see you on Thursday.